Good evening, everyone, and welcome again to our Eldering in Grace Circle, which is being offered by the Institute for Earth and Spirit and Danny and Carlos's project, A New Global We. So on this lovely spring evening, I will turn our microphone over to Danny so he can engage us in tonight's reflection on risk taking and the real work. Danny.
Thank you, Kathleen. Risk and the real work. That it will be the theme for this evening. My sense, I hope it's yours too, is that our mindfulness dialogues on eldering is evolving organically. Now, what I mean is that the themes seem to be suggesting themselves as we proceed. You may remember we began by clarifying what eldering is as distinct from aging, which led to the need for a foundational purpose that we found has to do with accessing and contributing our own unique truth and identity to the unfolding cosmos. Last time we immersed ourselves in what we felt is step one in this process: presence, awareness. We spoke about the field, Rumi's field of interbeing, and discovered, I think, that this presence is certainly more than observation, more even than personal identity, certainly as a separate identity, but is rather the ground of all being that informs every expression of the interconnected world we share, including ourselves. I offered a mid-month meditation on the YouTube platform, and I concluded by quoting the words of Psalm 46 that probably all of us are familiar with, Christian or not: "Be still and know that I am God." And I sort of suggested it was a kind of distillation of this emerging, expanding awareness and identity. In the words of Thomas Berry, this world is not a collection of objects, but a communion of subjects. An infinite I am. So eldering is perhaps coming to this realization and reminding our communities of this. This poem by the Spanish poet Antonio Machado echoes this, I think, emerging awareness. It's called Wayfarer. Wayfarer, the only way is your footsteps. There is no other. Wayfarer, there is no way. You make the way as you go. As you go, you make the way, and stopping to look behind, you see the path that your feet will never travel again. Wayfarer, there is no way. Only foam trails in the sea. Kathleen, I know you don't have that in front of you, I don't think. Do you have it by any chance? I will put that up for when we get to the next poem after our break, and we can share it again. So let me just share it again, because it sets the scene, I think. Wayfarer, the only way is your footsteps. There is no other. Wayfarer, there is no way. You make the way as you go. As you go, you make the way, and stopping to look behind, you see the path that your feet will never travel again. Wayfarer, there is no way, only foam trails in the sea. The implication, I believe, is not only that my life is connected to everything, but something else too. My life is an emerging reality, a becoming, an ever new world. If it was challenging to appreciate the wonder of interbeing, it will be equally difficult to integrate and live the reality of emergence, which is our focus here. However, I would suggest that we're not total beginners here, for we have in fact experienced this in our lives many times, this emergence, in particular moments, the way we have experienced the reality of interbeing. Seeing the emergence of the first crocuses in spring, for example, is one of those moments. But so is learning something new that you literally didn't know before is emergence. There are also the many moments of wonder in our everyday lives that we have simply become dull to. Probably this is why particular mind-blowing, eye-opening experiences, the cosmic nudges we have referred to, are especially important as reference points. These are the times when we find ourselves saying words like, why didn't I see this before? Perhaps there was even the sense that this was actually something I already knew but had somehow forgotten. The way we've talked about meeting one another in these breakout rooms as if a stranger that I had known all my life. In fact, often words like these are accompanied or followed by promises like from now on. From now on. And so it's here that we want to turn our attention in this session, the wonder of constant emergence. We could focus on intention or commitment, or we could explore principles of this, like curiosity and humility, and we will touch on those. But I think the word risk pulls all these aspects together, for as we get older, our lives unfortunately tend to shrink. And we actually have to work at being curious and develop a humility that allows us to let go of old certainties and open to new wonders, to keep expanding and emerging, in other words. So in this session, we want to promote this critical aspect of eldering versus aging. The French poet Anaïs Nin says it simply in a poem appropriately called Risk. She says this, and then the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. Isn't that wonderful? And then the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. This will be our focus here. So let's begin, as we do in our mindfulness dialogue approach, by connecting deeply to ourselves, to one another, and especially to this emerging moment. So position yourself comfortably as we do. Whatever works for you. We want to settle, relaxed, but also a little alert. Your back straight, your hands in your lap, your feet on the floor, your eyes closed or softened, and take 3 deep breaths. In through your nose and out through your mouth. Exhale completely. And breathe normally. Where you feel tension in your body, breathe into that place and breathe out. Let go of the tension. We'll do this for a few moments. Now notice the thoughts that are moving around in your head and let them melt, as it were, by simply paying attention to your breath as you breathe in and out deliberately. In your mind, softly say the theme of today, risk. Repeat the word a couple of times and let it settle into your body. I call to mind an experience when you risked and stepped or perhaps fell into an unexpected experience. I can remember learning to swim. It was like that for me. It was, or speaking another language, or riding a bike, or singing in harmony, or cooking, or painting. Bring up as many details as you can. What was it like? Were you afraid or apprehensive at first? Did you think you wouldn't be able to do it? Whatever it was, did you have to let go? Entrust yourself to someone or even something? What was it like when you actually did it? Amazement? Thrill? Wanting to do it again? Growing confidence? Stay with the feelings and body memories that this stirs. Breathe in the sensations and memories of risk and trusting, the wonder that it brought. Now take a deep breath and return. If your eyes were opened or eyes were closed, open your eyes. And let me ask Carlos to divide us into pairs and perhaps share whatever it is that you would like. We're going to take solid 10 minutes to give us a chance maybe to share an experience of risk like this. Could be anything. Describe the details. And then maybe say a word about where you are now in your life in this regard. What stops you risking? So anyway, just to sort of open up this among ourselves, Carlos, if you could do this. Good to see you all again. I hope you enjoyed one another.
Yes.
I've often told that joke of George Bernard Shaw, the Irish writer and wit. He was at a fancy cocktail party and the hostess came up to him and said, "Mr. Shaw, are you enjoying yourself?" And he said, "Yes, madam, and that's the only thing I'm enjoying."
Oh dear.
But it kind of sort of highlights that really you actually enjoy yourself. That's what enjoyment is. And maybe what we're doing here is expanding this, our own sense of that self. And hopefully with it comes joy. So let's see. For those of you maybe that haven't been here before, what we do after a breakout session like this, if we were to hear from every group, we would be here a long time. So we're trying to surface a collective voice in a representative way. So just see ourselves, listen in your deep self and see if you need and if you have something to say. We'll hear from 4 people, like the north, south, east, and west. And it maybe will start to give expression to our collective self, our collective voice. So what came up for you? If you feel moved to speak, please just speak. Go for it, Pamela.
Okay, hi everybody. So I just want to start by saying that seeing that thing about being AI being part of us was very disturbing. I don't like to be a part of anything that might be AI because it's a very scary thing right now. So I'm just putting that out there. I'd like to say how much I enjoyed being with Nancy. It was really a pleasure. She's 95 years old and her spirit is amazing. But with that, I'd like to, when you use the word emergence, Danny, my mind went to emergency. Okay, we just remove the E and add a Y, and I feel like we are in an emergency right now. I've never felt so emergency. And the interesting thing is last week, I had to go to the emergency room because I passed out in the bathroom of a restaurant and woke up as they were pushing me into the ambulance 20 minutes later. And I wound up with, it was pneumonia, believe it or not. I mean, I don't know, none of the doctors seem to be able to put the two things together, but that was an emergency for me, and an emergence for me, because I have been procrastinating in doing a number of things, even though I'm, you know, my life is still full at 79, almost 80. And I just made a retreat called a silent retreat, because I feel silence is so desperately needed in today's world, especially in my community. And I recognize that the last time I did something like this was in 1999. I found all the papers, believe it or not. And I thought, wow, we were talking about taking a risk. I certainly feel like I'm taking another risk, but having gone through what I went through last week, it's just another signal of what are you waiting for? You know, there's nothing to wait for. Just do it. And that is really I have lived my life that way. So, I mean, here I go again.
Well,
Thank
thank you so much, Pamela. And interesting that connection between emergence and emergency. I hadn't probably thought about it so much, but it's so relevant. So another voice to hear what we are saying. Just raise your hand either with the little thing or on the screen. And Dennis, and then Maureen.
My experience with delightful experience with Catherine. I have to start by saying I cannot get used to being in the middle of a sentence, or Catherine was in the middle of a sentence, and all of a sudden, boom, we're just gone. If that's anything about AI, God help us. Anyway, I was thinking in terms of when you said risk, I was thinking of that light bulb moment. That's my cue now, that I'm on the threshold of a risk. I suddenly have this, like, something, insight. And I found that when I risked acting on that insight, embracing that insight, it changed my world and the world of at least one other person, but oftentimes many other people. So that light bulb, aha, and just embrace it. And wow, that's my contribution.
That's wonderful, Dennis. Aha is right. And I do notice, and I want to acknowledge that AI is coming up more and more, and our uncertainty about it. So we will address it, of course. Maureen, and then Richard.
Well, right now I'm 86, but when I was 32, so I'm a sister, and I got invited to go to Japan for 2 years. 2 years. I came back after 50, and which is 5 years ago. But that risk, at the time, it was leaving friends behind, the world that I knew. I thought my life was on a track to go back to teaching high school, but somehow I had always wanted to go to a country far away. I don't know why. So I said, yes, sure, I'll go. And I knew in my heart it would be more than 2 years. But a new language, a new culture, I knew nobody when I arrived. And actually, there was nobody to meet me at the airport. I arrived at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I had sent at that time, it was 1970, so, you know, with no internet or anything, but I had sent, I even forget, a telegram or telegraph, whatever, that I was coming because I had to wait for a visa. It was the year of the Osaka Expo, so it took time to get a visa. So I was on the West Coast waiting for that. But when I arrived, nobody to meet me, but fortunately I had a phone number with me, and I didn't know how to use the phone. I had no money. It was, but it makes the greatest story. And it's, you know, I was ready when I finally got through to the sisters. I had a phone number with me. That's all I really had that was useful. And it was 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, and it was Pentecost Sunday. So I never hear the Spirit of the Lord fills the whole world. Doesn't matter when Pentecost falls, that day comes back into my mind.
There you go. It's certainly imprinted in your soul.
Very, very deeply imprinted. And I did get safely to the convent.
Thank you
Yes.
for sharing that story, Maureen. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
And Richard.
Well, Bennett Sims, who was an Episcopal bishop in Atlanta, referred to me as a Pentecostal church hopper because in Salt Lake City, I was looking for the Episcopal Cathedral, and I see up on a hill this gigantic church, and I said, "Oh, it's the Episcopal Cathedral." And I walk in, and it's all marble and statues of saints, and I look around, and I say to someone, "Is this the cathedral of such and such?" "No, it's the Catholic cathedral. The Episcopal is down the street." So I went out the door, looked to my left, and saw another church. And I went in, and it looked very unusual. And I said, "Is this the Episcopal cathedral?" And they said, "No, it's the Presbyterian church." So I had one more option, and I went down and talk about risk. I finally made it. But Sue, who spent many years in Atlanta, and I spoke. And what we shared was risks sometimes be referred to as challenge, and that when we take risks, certainly they may not come out as we envisioned, but usually they are replaced by community. So, and it's a community of subjects. So Thomas was right, Thomas Berry, and we are a community of subjects. I grew up with all the entertainers on the Ed Sullivan Show. They used to tell me their jokes at my aunt and uncle's house at 4 o'clock before the Sullivan Show. So basically, I'm a stand-up comic, so forgive me. But anyway, the end.
Oh, just to highlight one of the points in your story, Richard, too, how risk kind of seems to create community. Maybe it breaks you out of that. And maybe risk has something to do with breaking out of our fear or out of our shell. It's challenging, of course. Why would we? Why would we want to? So here we at least have set the scene. We have a sense of what we're trying to be with, explore. Just notice for a moment, it always helps me to notice that even after this first 20 minutes of being together, breathing together, and sharing a little bit, we have created a space which feels safer, where we might be inclined to risk a little bit more as we step into this second stage of our mindfulness dialogue that we call exploring. So here we want to take a little look at risk, its challenges, some of which you've surfaced already, but also its essential importance for eldering. Perhaps the first thing maybe to note is that as we get older, as I said at the beginning, we tend to want to risk less. I mean, there are obvious and maybe sensible reasons for this. I mean, less physical flexibility makes me disinclined to take up mountain climbing at this stage. But why do I shy away from learning a new language or taking up a new hobby? Why is risk harder when we get older? It may be that the impulse, the life force, has declined along with many other things through the inexorable process of entropy. The poem by Anais Nin that we looked at earlier highlights this aspect of the pressure to bud. But when we're younger, when the risk to remain tight in a bud becomes more painful than the risk it takes to blossom. It's like falling in love, clearly one of my favorite analogies that tends to happen more easily when we're young. But perhaps it doesn't have to. We've all tasted forms of love that are certainly not limited to youth, like the love of a grandchild, or perhaps more banal, the love of a good book, or an interesting chat, or sitting in a beloved garden. In fact, both ages of love have one thing in common that we might describe in a general way as curiosity. So maybe it's just that we don't cultivate our curiosity enough when we get older. When we're younger, other things like hormones or novelty or peer pressure feed the curiosity impulse. When these fade, as they inevitably do, we can still and clearly need to foster curiosity in ways that will encourage us to take the risk that is needed to try new things and thereby to learn and continue to grow. So perhaps a question we might begin to address in this exploration of risk is, how can we foster curiosity? A second aspect of risk, I'd say, is trust, or perhaps more accurately, entrusting. Denise Levertov describes this process in a poem called The Avowal. Let me see if I can share the screen this time. There we go. Get rid of some of this stuff. I love this piece. As swimmers dare to lie face to the sky and water bears them. As hawks rest upon air and air sustains them. So would I learn to attain free fall and float into Creator Spirit's deep embrace, knowing no effort earns that all surrounding grace.
Mm.
And now that I have it on screen, I'd love to hear Kathleen's voice. Would you share it with us, Kathleen?
As swimmers dare to lie face down to the sky and water bears them, as hawks rest upon the air and air sustains them, so would I learn to attain free fall and float into Creator Spirit's deep embrace, knowing no effort earns that all surrounding grace.
Even hawks have to entrust themselves to the air, just as a swimmer dares to lie face to the sky.
Mhm.
And trusting, in fact, is the way of life as learning and becoming. But for me, there's another nuance that we need to highlight here in the context of aging and eldering, and that is in trusting as letting go, by which I mean letting go of control. This, moreover, I believe, is the ultimate stance before life in a world where we realize more and more as we get older that we control less and less than we ever thought. That ultimately we control nothing of real significance. So the Kentucky farmer Wendell Berry speaks to this kind of risk in a poem he calls the real work that Kathleen referred to at the beginning, the real work. Let me read it first and again ask Kat. Well, let me hear Kathleen read it first. Would you do so, Kat?
It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And when we no longer know which way to go, we have come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings.
It's really quite real work of life actually begins. That's fascinating. Certainly, this is the kind of risk we're referring to as part of eldering. This is where the inevitability of aging is integrated into the conscious and deliberate art of eldering in grace.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, the real work, as Barry calls it, is surely living with not knowing, but more. It is working with not knowing in a way that creates something new, and continuously so. Barry gives us a sense of the way. The first stage, he says, is actually being baffled, which to me suggests letting go of the illusions of control that we, who are products of our technological society, have developed to an art form. This is the starting point, he says. This is the starting point where we can then relate to the impediments of life, but in a new way. It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And that when we no longer know which way to go, we have come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. And then this final line, the impeded stream is the one that sings. Here's one last little thought on this notion of risk. It's about differences. Differences are a fact of life. Differences are natural. They're actually the way life unfolds. Think gravity, germination, but also music and dance. In fact, well-being in all its forms comes from relating creatively to the inevitable differences we encounter. We're both challenged by differences because of the threat they appear to bring, and this, of course, has always been critical to our survival, but we're also intrigued and drawn to differences when our curiosity overrides our fear, the way it does with children.
Mm.
It's more obvious when we're younger, as the children of all species reflect. It takes the form of play, which is essentially our learning process. Are you familiar with the term neotenous? It refers to the retention of juvenile features in the adult animal. We human animals are actually the ultimate neotenous species, meaning that we retain many juvenile traits into adulthood, chief among them being the capacity to play. And here's the critical piece. Retaining and cultivating play is critical to staying young and continuing thereby to learn and grow. Let me relate it more directly to our focus here, eldering, which we have described as continuing to learn, even or especially as we age, turns on our capacity for play. Eldering turns on our capacity to play. Doesn't this give a new meaning to second childhood? It usually carries negative connotations when in fact it should be reason for hope in the face of aging. So what's the message? Play. Play with your grandkids or someone else's grandkids. Get a dog and let her pull you into her playfulness, or a cat. Play with the birds as they explode into spring. I have an app on my phone which identifies the song of every bird. I walk with it every day and it just explodes my mind and my community. Play with learning new things, cooking, painting. I saw an amazing movie the other night, The Taste of Things with Juliette Binoche. The first half hour is no dialogue, it's just cooking. It's like, wow. Play with music and dance. Play with travel if you can. Play with a new language. Perhaps this emphasis gives a new twist to risk as something lighter, more fun, playful. So, what does this stir in you about risk and how it is related to eldering, and about the role of play? So we're going to take our 10 minutes. Carlos, would you do the needful and divide us into our pairs again, into our wisdom dyads? And we'll see each other in 10 minutes. And by the way, anyone that's worried, you do get a 60-second warning. It shows up on the screen that you're going to be closed down in 60 seconds. So lest you get caught in the middle of an important sentence. Good to have you back. So let's spend 7 or 8 minutes hearing from 4 of us, and listen and speak from that part that you feel is connected to what's emerging. And if you're not ready to speak, just see yourself as part of that collective voice and listen as such. So whoever feels moved, what would Sue? You're
unmuted. You're muted.
Unmute.
Sorry, I'm trying to be so careful not to be noisy. So, Elizabeth Adams and I were in the breakout room together, and we agreed that we have no trouble playing. We find play in all kinds of things. But what happens is that the state of the world interferes and as well as losses and different things. I will say some physical things in my case, as I've gotten older, have been challenging. And just keeping that. But I do find the things that I've always loved come back and create that sense of play. But it's constantly being threatened by, I think one of our, I think it was maybe Pamela, who said in the beginning that it has never, the world has never seemed as treacherous as it seems right now. And I agree with that. And I'm in several different book clubs, and everybody feels the same way. I mean, people are just crazed by what is happening. And so, other than prayer and, doing everything we can to, be activist about the issues that we care about, it's really a constant battle to feel even a sense of play. But so we both agreed for that. But Elizabeth, don't let me speak for you. Please add in what if I didn't cover it.
I'm cool. I'm cool.
Well, thank you, Sue, because you're highlighting something I think that all of us resonate with, and we need to hold this as we continue with our conversation. So another voice. As I'm looking at 2 screens, so I may not see everyone. So if you're ready, just speak. Go ahead, Elizabeth Adams.
Okay, well, I do think that, it's absolutely brilliant to talk about play, because I do think that in my entire life, from when I was a little kid until now, my capacity to play is directly related to my willingness to risk. No matter how bad it gets, no matter how much I fall flat on my face, no matter how much the thing that's nearest and dearest to me does not happen and I'm heartbroken, I have this natural instinct to play. And, and it's like, oh, well, it can be a terrible tragedy. And there is a small part of me that's always only about 2 seconds away from, oh, well.
And maybe when we get to this stage of our lives, we can risk playing. I mean, we can say the things that we wouldn't dare to say. Respectable younger people. I find myself saying things that are completely inappropriate now. I'm not going to share them with you right now, but now let's hear another voice. There's two of us. Kathleen.
I had the pleasure of being with Janet Moss in my dyad, and we both resonated with this sense that of really wanting this time of our lives to be a time of a lighter time. But maybe this relates to what Betsy and who were you with? Sorry. And Sue was saying, that the world won't let you. And I said something that I was almost embarrassed and ashamed to say, which is that I feel that at this time, my responsibility for the world is thinning out. I'm holding that much more lightly. All of us, I'm sure, have been engaged in world building somehow in a constructive, creative, for some of us, a missionary kind of way. And I'm thinking now, this is not my season for doing that. Somehow, whatever it is,
Amen, Kathleen. Amen.
that I could be or should be doing is of much more, as Janet was saying, interior way. I want to say it's much more of a relational or cultivating way. And so at a time when the world is in such anguish, I'm not going to start a new institute for anything, if you know what I mean. I'm going to try somehow to let, as we heard at Mass on Sunday, something from Eddie Hillesum, I'm going to help God still be God, playful, creative God, and be a space for that creativity and imagination and playfulness to happen, and hope that that is a gift for the world and that it alleviates suffering somewhere. Anyway.
That is so good, Kathleen. I mean, and I think, again, we resonate with that. At this stage of our lives, you feel like it's time to put down the spade, but somehow or another you feel you can hardly do it. Maybe there's such a hunger. I know that there's a few of us in this group who are in an eldering, a men's group, and looking for ways of how can you be active when you're older. Anyway, I didn't mean to get carried off on that, but one more voice to see if we can pull this exploring piece together. Go ahead, Jean.
Well, I just so resonate with Kathleen. I was an activist for many years in my life. And to tell you the truth, I think we're all wondering, all the activist people, did anything that we did work? The way we were doing it. And so to continue doing that, it doesn't work. It's not working. And what for me in my I'll be 87 now in May. I can't walk very well because I have a stenosis in my spine. But I find that going into this new consciousness of knowing that we're connected to each other and knowing, you know, I'm online in Zoom with people who are my community, who are working in this to try to be the new story, to try to be this, to be what Thomas Berry talks about, you know, to relate to everyone and everything as subject. That's the work for me to do, where I don't even have to get out of my chair to do, but I need to go into a new way of being, a new way of thinking, a new way. And I was thinking of the play understanding, you know, I was sharing with Pamela. Even I love being with children. I always have, and I've worked with many, many little children. And I have two very favorites who are not my grandchildren. Naturally, I'm a sister, but they're twins, James and John, and they're 11 years old now. And I used to play with them so much. I loved it. But now they're on their phones, on their pads. They're not playing.
Wow.
Maybe they play sports, but this is such a need. Even the children are not playing.
God.
We need to play. So thank you, Danny and Kathleen, for bringing us all together and for all that we're learning together, and in eldering that we all experience. We're experiencing the same thing. And we have a community here that I love. So just very grateful.
That's wonderful. And again, it does highlight the importance of this. And maybe it's a little segue, in fact, into the third stage of our mindfulness dialogue, which is discovering. Because there were differences in what we were saying here in different emphases, and appropriately so. Let's pause for a moment and breathe into that place that we've created together. We've been playing for the past hour or more. If you watch children, there's nothing more serious than play. And listen for what we hear ourselves trying to say. It may be just a word or a phrase at this stage. What are we saying about risk and trusting, play at this stage of our lives, where we do look back and wonder, what was all that about? Did we do it the right way? How can we serve now? Because I think all of us, the fact that we're here, are still motivated to serve in some way, serve this community of life that we're part of. But it's different now, not less. So let's hold this tension, these tensions that I'm maybe giving voice to, that I'm hearing in among us, and listen for the beginnings of a collective new awareness, an emergent sense. And as you feel ready, we'll hear from four of us, but this time less maybe reflective in the sense of intellectual. Take a chance, take a risk. Risk saying something that might appear to be not thought through or not founded in data. Just a sense. This is our time of revelation, surely. We are the elders who are trying to access something that's there already, but waiting for us to hear. So anyone like to begin to give a little voice to it? Marjorie.
as I put together risk and play and our communication here, I just got a picture of all these faces that I'm looking into here, and I'm just feeling all of us at this stage of life, no matter where our life has taken us, we've all become candles of gratitude. We just stand as candles of gratitude. And I'm really quite touched by that idea.
And what a beautiful theme. If anyone would like to build on it or counterpoint it the way we do with good creative interplay. Thank you, Marjorie. What else do we hear? And just jump in if you feel. Go ahead, Catherine.
Well, given the last speaker, I guess I'd like to, we could join in this little light of mine. I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine. I'm going to let it shine.
Shine.
Light of mine. I'm going
I'm gonna
to
let it shine, let it shine, let it shine,
Let it shine, let it
let it
shine.
shine.
Beautiful. Hey, may all I do flow from me like a river, no forcing and no holding back, the way it is with children. So what else? Build on
Yeah.
Catherine's little light and Marjorie's candle of gratitude. What do you hear? No right or wrong here, obviously. As I said, I'm bouncing between the two screens to make sure I don't miss anyone. If you're ready, just speak up. Go ahead, Michael.
I'm struck by the new light, the new dawn of Eldring, and drawn to an evening moment of walking the dog at night, which I do every night, but just to take the time to look up at the stars and channel the stars is what I feel, and they're only seeable in the dark. So let me go to the top of the road and sit on a bit of a hill, metaphorically and really, and on any night, every night, spend a little bit with the stars.
If this was a jazz group, that was the trumpet. And one
Michael,
more
I'm reminded of Oscar Wilde's "We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking up at the stars."
Yeah.
They're tough times, but we can still look up.
And as we said earlier in one of our sessions, through my eyes, the stars look back on themselves in wonder.
And we are all made of stardust.
We are all made of
Yeah.
dust. Wow, so here's our representative voice, and it's captured a little bit we are recorded. It will go on our YouTube. I'm going to ask Carlos in a minute to talk about YouTube and allay if possible any concerns about AI. We're not sort of turning us into robots here in any way. Anything has happened. But let me say this as a kind of a summary and segue into Carlos. Now, what are we saying here about risk? That's what the theme was, as a critical aspect of eldering. So first of all, we said risk is a critical aspect of knowing and growing. But risk is harder when you're older for some reasons that we went into. Risk is fostered by curiosity when we are young, so how keep ourselves curious now? How can we help each other to be curious? And then a third little point that I brought up, we are a neotenous species, a playful to the end. And how can we use this to stay young? I can't help but quote, let me see if I can share the screen for these 60s folks. I am. May your hands always be busy. May your feet always be swift. May you have a strong foundation when the winds of changes shift. May your heart always be joyful. May your song always be sung. And may you stay
Forever.
young. Dear old master from my time.
Yeah.
So perhaps in fact, this is the essential difference between aging and eldering. An elder stays forever young, forever learning and growing, forever singing. For the impeded stream, the one with stenosis, like myself too, like all of the ailments that are constraining us, the impeded stream is the one that sings. Eldering is about using these impediments, these challenges of life to generate ever new possibilities, ever new songs. So we keep on singing, and I'm going to invite my fellow singer, Carlos, to talk to us a little bit about this ongoing concerto that we're creating.
Thank you, Danny. I wanted to say that, there were some comments about AI today that were kind of interesting because there was no AI involved in any of those problems. This is interesting because we project all our fears onto the boogeyman. That's the boogeyman that we oftentimes fall back on. We were originally thinking of making the subject of artificial intelligence a bigger part of today's exploration of risk, for obvious reasons. But risk taking is big enough subject of eldering and grace that we realized we didn't want to muddy the waters with our agenda. There is already enough to talk about, as was obvious by today's exchange. So that got us thinking that there are plenty of subjects that are not directly connected to eldering and grace that members of this community might be interested in exploring more deeply together in a similar format. So there are plenty of other issues: climate change, Gaza, poverty, privilege, gun violence, to name just a few. So based on that analysis and other conversations that we've had, we're announcing that soon we will be offering a mid-month opportunity for folks to come together and dialogue about the things that are weighing heavy on our hearts. We're about to launch a mid-month opportunity to weigh in on subjects that are most current and that people need to talk about, knowing that their unique voice will be heard and respectfully held the way we do. This method of mindfulness dialogue we see as a universal platform to get beyond the polarizing diatribes and debates that pass as respectful dialogue. These are getting us nowhere, and we are exploring a different way using this platform that you've been part of. In our first opening gathering, we want to talk about AI specifically. If there's interest, perhaps we can talk about other things in subsequent months. The format will be open and unscripted, though it will follow a similar pattern that you've been enjoying, connecting, exploring, and discovering. Everyone will have a chance to respectfully voice their thoughts. We will practice holding a space for true diversity, and AI will help us capture all the voices. What difference will it make? That's what we're excited to explore. Our vision is to ask the question, what difference will it make to hear from all of us? Maybe from 1,000 of us. In some future time, maybe from 10,000 of us, maybe 1 million of us, maybe 10 million. Who knows how big a community like this can go when basically AI is helping us keep it together and hearing all the voices. That is what a New Global We YouTube channel is all about. That's the channel we're trying to create. We invite you to become an active member. Now back to our current dialogue. In the spirit of risk-taking and play, after today's gathering, we want to invite you to, again, spend 5 minutes to send us one paragraph summary of a key insight that you had today. Just play with it. Don't take it too seriously. That's all it is. There is no wrong or right answer. Just free write what emerges for you with as much detail as you can provide in 5 minutes, and send it to us at a contact at anewglobalwe.com. We will have AI help us compile everyone's answer to see what story emerges. It actually might be fun and surprising in our estimation. What will it be meaningful, or will it be just gibberish? Who knows? But let's find out.
That's wonderful, Carlos. That's really good.
Yeah.
We will continue, obviously, with our monthly sessions. These sessions that Carlos is referring to will be more open-ended, less scripted. I will not be offering comments and so on the way I do here to set a theme. It will be an open mindfulness dialogue on themes. One little thought that it struck me as you spoke about it, I've been working with a place of learning that, like so many places, have experienced fragmentation around issues like Gaza and people forced to resign, a lot of things that are not talked about anymore. And they invited me in to help them with what I called the art of the painful conversation. And the outcome was a selected group of first responders who would train themselves more with me in mindfulness dialogue, so that when an issue would come up, that group would meet immediately and talk about it and help frame it for the larger community, so that you don't have just these things thrown at one another, but some way of framing the conversation, hearing as many voices as possible, a contribution towards more, more open sharing, more emergent truth. So let me hand it back to our dear Kathleen, our host, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Want to sing us home, Kathleen?
I won't sing, but I'll invite us to, in the spirit, hold that candle of gratitude, that light of gratitude up this evening. Something that we were invited to do and to become as we do this creative eldering, and as we recover our original childlikeness in this time. So we thank you, Danny. Thank you so much for always leading us so beautifully and carefully into these deep conversations. And we'll see each other again in 1 month for Eldering in Grace. And thank you, Carlos, for all you do to facilitate these deep dialogues.
Blessings, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.